Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec. Today we have a guest with us from the continental US, and it's Tammy Alvarez. Let me introduce you to Tammy before we let her speak. Tammy is a visionary and founder of the Career Winners Circle. She catalyses leaders to level up their performance for themselves and their businesses with a comprehensive collection of coaching and training programs designed to strengthen leaders to grow their careers quickly and sustainably. Her spirited break all the rules approach blends 20 plus years of C-suite experience on Wall Street with a pragmatic, results-based coaching style. She helps businesses, professionals create an impact so they can love every Monday morning. That's why I hesitated over that, because I knew the Monday morning thing was coming, and I thought, how will I get this out without laughing? But anyway, this is what she does, and she can tell us how we'll learn to love Monday mornings. She's an inspirational coach, trainer, and epic storyteller who delivers transformative learning experiences for her global client base. She believes at the heart of every successful business is the leaders who inspire courage. And so let me preface it by letting Tammy speak and say she's still on Monday, so she's still loving it. We're on Tuesday, so we're already in the week. Welcome, Tammy.
And how did things feel for you guys yesterday, right? And thanks so much for the invite. Glad to be here.
That's great. Now, we sent Tammy, as we do, some questions. So we'll start with the first one, which is, I think, was a result of me reading a little bit more about Tammy's background and about what she talks about. And so it's about career change. And I know that through our podcast, we've talked to you all about when is the best time to change your career? How do you make the decision? How do you know you've made the right decision? And if you haven't made the right decision, what do you do about it then without looking like you're job hopping? So the first question was, should we really be thinking about a career change now? And I guess the now was in terms of, we tried to talk to Tammy last year, and so it was a bit more relevant last year than it is this year, but maybe not. Maybe it's relevant all of the time. So tell us, Tammy, is it time to change careers?
Well, there's never a good time or a bad time, right? Okay. In terms of changing careers. And I think some of the key indicators that we should be paying attention to, these are the warning signs that we love to ignore until we can't anymore. And, if you're getting that pit in your stomach on Sunday afternoon around 3:00, dreading the nonsense that's about ready to unfold the next day, probably time to listen to that. If your spidey senses are saying that you're getting sidelined or you're not making the impact that you used to, those are warning signs to listen to. And these are things that it's easy to ignore because we're comfortable and because things aren't that bad. And we're not basically getting punched in the face with you need to make a change. However, I think, you laughed about the Loving Mondays thing, and a lot of people do. They think it's a pipe dream. It doesn't really exist. But when you really lean into and think about how much of your day do you get to spend doing the things that light you up? And what I mean by that is, what are the things you could do for 12 hours a day and end the day more energized than when you started? And how much of that do you get to do? And if the answer is none or not enough, then it's time to think about making a change. And whether that's a total career pivot, whether that's just incorporating things into your daily job that you've got some room to do that in, those are some really key things. And when we were supposed to talk last year, when we talk about, is it the right time? Here's what I found. During times of chaos is the best time to surge. Because everyone else is hiding under their desk, hoping not to get fired. And so I found in my career during financial, I was on Wall Street. And so during massive financial disruptions and all the crises that happened over my career in corporate, that was the time I made my biggest moves. So that's the time to play big and not to hide.
Just in terms of that, we've often talked about having 3 absolute career changes in your lifetime. So not just moving from one industry, but moving from one role, one type of work into something completely different. And I often use myself as an example because I trained as an architect and I worked at that for a little bit of time. But what I became out of that was a public speaking coach, which was nothing to do with what I had done previously. And now out of that, many years of consulting and associated executive work. So now I do floral art, floral design, which once again sort of relates back to the creative at the start, but a totally different industry, totally different work, totally different things. And those changes were brought about by me thinking that I could give more rather than I wasn't being fulfilled, but I could give more in different areas that these organisations would never consider. So if we've got people who are in that sort of position, who are feeling like they've got something else that they know about, something else that they do, whether it's outside of their career, how do they, and they don't want to leave the organisation they're with because it's got good core values, or it's a great place, or the people are really good. How do they transition from what they're doing and what people expect them to do to something that they love in the same organisation?
Yeah, and I think it depends on how epic of a move they want to make or they're able to make. And so where I found my ability to make big shifts without leaving the company,
Yep.
Within an organization is by taking on, especially with the senior leaders that you have that listen to this podcast, by taking on what I call the third rail projects. Now, in New York City, I'm a New Yorker, and there's 3 rails on the subway system. And the third rail is the electric one. So if you touch it, you die. And so we would always call these the third rail projects because no one would touch them.
Right.
But they were things that were global, they were enterprise, they were messy, but they made a massive impact into the company's results. And so if you see that opportunity where there's just stuff that all these departments are struggling with, that make a significant difference to the bottom line of the organization or align with whatever goals they have, take on the leadership for that. Because when you do that, obviously your group is connected to it somehow, or else you wouldn't know it was a problem. But now people are more than willing to step behind, let you lead or take the bullet, however you choose to use that term, but they'll follow. And when they're allowed to put their stamp on it in terms of here's my idea on how to fix it, then all of a sudden you are leading this coalition to solve one of the company's most difficult problems. And the beauty of it is you don't actually have to get it all right because people have expected to be a complete failure. So getting it 50% of the way there is great news, and it puts you in a different category. And from that vantage point, you can see what's going on within the organization and decide where is it that you think would be most interesting to make your next move.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was in corporate, I led everything from sales teams to audit and everything in between. So I worked in 11 different significant roles, and that's how I did it. Because you have that higher purview, you've got those relationships that you're building, and then you're like, oh, I'm a transformation expert. Like I love change and transformation. So I'd be like, it's a hot mess over there. I want to go play there for a bit. And then, make those navigation moves to be able to do that. And so for those that are in a position to lead, and it doesn't have to be massive. If you are a frontline manager and you see something that's a mess, offer to fix it and get your partners around with you. So whether it's finance, HR, legal, compliance, all of these other groups that are impacted by how well or not things work, start very early in your career to learn how to collaborate like that. And that will serve you well in being able to call the shots in where you want to move and the decisions that you make for your career.
On that point, Tammy, I hear you absolutely. Let's say you're in a position like the senior manager is sales lead position. They're leading a sales team. They love it and they're excellent at it and they're recognized for it. Senior management finds there is an opportunity and want them to go into business development lead role or operations lead role, whatever it is. There is normally a hesitancy to say, oh, I like everyone to think like you said, let me take this on, I can do it. But sometimes they don't because they think, I'm so good at this. What if I ruin my reputation? What do you say to that?
I say that's a fear-based response, which is legit, right? I don't want to ruin my reputation. But if you're getting tapped to do something that's out of your wheelhouse, then there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And so for the longest time, like I always thought that the fact that I never looked like anybody else at the leadership table and I didn't get there the same way or think the same way, I always tried to hide that because I thought that was my Achilles heel. I had this one epic moment in my career where I had to go and talk to a leader that was 4 levels above me. And no one else would do it. Everyone else was afraid to deliver the bad news. I needed something done in the EU and we knew he was going to have a fit. And so we're in having this conversation. I'm trying to be bold, right? And not be a total chicken, although I was not feeling very bold. And so we were having this very, very difficult conversation. I'll never forget this. I know he did this on purpose, but the phone rang and he put it on speaker. And as soon as I heard the other end of the phone, the voice, my jaw dropped. Basically, I knew the voice immediately. And to paraphrase, the conversation started with like, hey, dude, how'd I do last night? And it was one of the presidential candidates. And they had just had their first debate the night before.
Oh.
And so I'm sitting here like, this guy is growing out, giving possibly the future president of the United States advice on how he did. And like, who am I? Why am I even here? So I listened to the conversation, tried not to seem completely awestruck. We got back to our argument and I lost. And I proceeded to go to my boss's office. And I was like, what am I doing here? I'm not this. I'm not that. I don't belong. And she's letting me rant for a bit. Now we had glass offices, so I'm sure they were about ready to call security because it looked like I was just, pacing like a crazy person. And so she's like, "Are you done?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm done." She goes, "Sit down." And she goes, "You're here because you weren't part of the problem. You're here because you're different, because you're willing to have those conversations, and because you were willing to go in and slay the dragon without a sword." And and so all this time, I thought that the fact that I was the only woman on the leadership team, or the youngest, or the one who didn't get a college degree until I was 40, like all these things made me not belong, especially on Wall Street. But because of that, that was not my Achilles heel. It was my superpower. And so for those people who are getting tapped to do things that are out of your wheelhouse, somebody sees something in you that you don't.
Yeah.
Go for the learning experience because they will cover your back.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. That's just so true in so many situations. I don't know how
if I had
often.
learned that 20 years ago, my life would have been a lot less painful, right? With all the anxiety and the imposter syndrome and all that stuff. I'm like, would have been nice to know sooner.
Yeah.
But what would you have to talk about? You need something to be able to say to people, I've lived this. I know this is not the case. So Fulyana's got some lovely stories that she's told about sitting next to Richard Branson at a dinner where she thought she was not supposed to be there, or getting in the lift with the CEO of Citibank, just thinking, oh, whoops, I shouldn't be in the lift with him even.
Absolutely.
So we've all lived through that. It is interesting because one of the catch cries that I see, not so much at that upper level, but at the middle and entry level, is that in an organisation where people are threatened by your skills when you're coming in new, they'll say, oh, yes, you work hard, but you don't have industry experience. So my question is, do we start battling that industry experience label and say it doesn't matter what industry you're in, if you're managing a business, managing people, managing resources, whatever they are, that the theory, the principles, the actions are the same?
Yes. And where we need to start to think differently about industry changes is because leadership is, everlasting. If you're a good leader, you can lead through anything. But there's a few things that you need to think about, especially as you start to get into that mid and senior level tier. It's making that transition from being paid for what you do to being paid for what you know. And then when you use your perspectives and skills and experiences, to really identify that superpower that you've got, then you want to find the opportunities where your skills are in high demand and in short supply. And here's a story that, I'll kind of tell you how this actually works, because my clients, we do this all the time together. And so I had one of my clients who was in financial services, surprise, surprise. And, and so in financial services, every year we reduce our staff by 10% at least. It's just how the business goes. But yet you still have to innovate and inspire and get things done and serve customers and make more money than you did last year. And then, your headcount keeps going down, your budget keeps going down, but you still have to deliver. And so my client, Phil, didn't even know that was a skill. Now, there's a startup that we all know and love. And so this startup ultimately went public. And at the time they went public, something else happened. Their competition got their act together. And they were an industry disruptor. Now, the first two levels within this organization had founded this startup, and it was well funded. So whenever they had a problem, all they had to do was get more money because the investors were lining up out the door. So there was always more money, more tools, more toys, all of those things. So they never, ever had to do more with less. And they just started this when they were like 25. So they didn't have the skill they needed because they were public, they were losing market share, and their stock price was plummeting. So now in comes Phil, who does this just naturally. And not only because he knows nothing about this business, right? He's a financial services guy, absolutely nothing about this business, but he knows how to do more with less. And not only does he know how to do that, but he has a service mindset. So he shows others how to do it too. Now he is sitting at the cool kids table all the time. And he is in such high demand within this organization because as smart as these leaders were, they did not know how to do this. So as a leader, when you're switching industries, there's always, market disruptors. So when some industries are surging, others are not. And so find the things that you love to do that you're best at, and then be smart about what's going on in the market and identify those opportunities where those things are desperately needed, because there is always an answer for that.
That's where we're going to leave this first part of this discussion with Tammy Alvarez. Join us for part 2, where we will continue this discussion about changing roles, changing positions, changing organisations, industry or otherwise. But for now, I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.